morning, everybody, and welcome to Authors Up, our favorite place to be. I always like to say that on Sunday evenings,
Yes.
right here on ALH Broadcasting. And as you can see, we are missing one of our own tonight. We'll talk about her in a little bit. But
Again.
But right now, we're going to say good evening to Queen Victoria E. Henderson. Hello, Queen.
Good
How are
evening.
you tonight?
I am okay. I am okay. I'm still going to say I'm going to bless the Lord at all times. That's what I'm going to say. All is well.
Yeah, that's where we have to stay sometimes, and
Yes.
sometimes it takes us talking to ourselves and bringing us to that place. Because I tell you, these times can get rough. They can get
Yes.
rough, but we are
Yes.
glad that I just wanted to say I'm thankful to God. Yes, I am. In everything, in everything.
In
I'm
everything, give thanks.
in everything. But
Yes.
I am so grateful that I have partnerships with you and with Ruth, because it's praying is a wonderful, wonderful thing. But there is something about being able to touch your prayer partner and touch a prayer warrior that
Yes.
say, look, girl, I'm having time with this thing right here. You
And
gotta,
it
you gotta
lifts
help
you
me.
right up. Lifts
You
you right
gotta help
up.
me. You gotta help me not go off. You gotta help me not go under. You gotta help me to know and understand that God has a plan, a great plan for my life.
Yes.
And regardless of what's going on right now, He is still God.
Amen.
He has not forgotten me. And I
Right.
still look to Him for
Amen.
everything, for everything. So I'm grateful tonight, and I'm thankful to be here. And Victoria, you want to get started with our no, I'll go ahead and start. Let me start with our
Okay.
review.
Okay. All
Then
right.
we'll switch to you and back to me. Okay.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
I sat here and I thought to myself, okay, we can review. What did I do
What I
last
do?
Da-da. I don't even know. I don't even remember. I even went back and looked at my calendar and thought, okay, there's some empty spots here. And I know I was real busy last week, but I don't know doing what. I think I was working on uh, clutter. I
Okay.
worked on clutter last week. I have a
Good.
file that I want to get rid of, and there's so many things in it that and I don't want to sound morbid or anything like that, but I often think, you know sometimes when I'm going through my work and poetry and books or whatever, and somebody say, don't throw that away, don't throw that away, because you might need it, you might want to use it again. But the
No.
reality of it is, if somebody else had to come in and go through the things that I think are so vital for
I
me to keep
know.
out of here, they would be gone. And I always laugh and say, if I'm trying to clean anything up, I need my grandson. I
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
because Christian will he'll pick something up, and I'll say, oh, wait, let me look at that. And he'll say, when's the last time you saw it? When's the last time you read it? When's the last time anybody asked you about it? Do you even know what it is? And I said, well, no, I need to see it so I can figure that out. He didn't know it needs to go. That's what needs to happen.
I need him here too. I need him. I need him.
So that's where I am in this 5 drawer file cabinet. So I know I did work on that last week. I was
Oh,
very
good.
diligent about working on that, and I have gotten some things accomplished in that area, and I was glad to do that. I visited a longtime friend. I was happy to spend time with her. You
Uh-huh.
and I shared something.
Yes.
Today we shared a nice brunch with
Yes.
some friends, and that's all I'll say in case you want to say something else about that. And we missed our Ruth. We missed Ruth. Ruth is on assignment with the grandbaby. We had to chastise her just a little, a
just a
little,
little bit.
because we told her we are allowing her to travel to see the grandbaby with
Exactly.
the understanding that she will send us pictures. And she fell down on the job,
She sure did.
fell down on the job. However, once we spoke to her a little sternly, because she is our friend, the pictures began to come and we began to laugh and just, it was just joyous. She's such a beautiful little baby, and we're glad. I'm hoping that when Ruth gets back, maybe we need to talk to her before she comes back, because I'm hoping that we will be able to introduce little Mercy to
Yes,
our
yes.
listening viewing audience. We've been trying to get a picture out of her so we can post it, so you all can go, oh,
Hey, right
oh,
along with us. We
just
look, we got
like we did
videos
it.
too. We got videos too. Tell
Yeah,
people
yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah. We
We got
did.
video.
Got video as well. So all in all, it was a good week. I have to. We were talking just before we came on the show. Sometimes we got to remind ourselves of,
Yes.
of the goodness of the Lord.
Yeah,
Don't
man.
think you would think we didn't have to, but sometimes life is life,
Sometimes.
and you got to remember. But God is still good.
Exactly.
He's still good. So tell us about your week, Victoria. What was going on with you?
My week was spent, of course, working. So we're still in the throes of the fiscal shutdown, and folks just want to slip in their invoices the last minute. Like, y'all supposed to have this to me 2 weeks ago, but we still, oh,
Press on.
we pressing on. And I had to tell myself the other day, I'm grateful for employment. That's what I'm gonna be grateful for this morning is employment. That
Yeah.
I am in a job where I feel needed and I feel fulfilled. And it's all in God's plan. And I was telling you before I came on that had two deaths that I won't speak on right now, but they were today, and I was just like so heavy hearted today. But I'm gonna tell you the honest truth. Once we got to talking and praising God and saying our prayer beforehand,
Yeah.
and all I can do is when I think of the goodness of Jesus and all
Don't
He's
start. Don't
done for
start.
me,
You
my
know it
soul
won't
cries
take but a
out
minute.
hallelujah. 'Cause I woke up. I woke up.
There
I
you go.
woke up.
There you
I
go.
woke up today and I'm here on the show again tonight with my friends, and I'm grateful. I
Yeah.
am mighty grateful. Thank you for Angela Cooks coming on, and Nakayeta coming on, and whoever else might come on. We thank you for being here and for being a part of Authors Up. And I've been already smiling. My cheeks are hurting. I'm smiling so much. And so I'm grateful too for friendship. And we did have a brunch. We had a group that was going through your daughter Lynn. We did the Rick Warren's Purpose Driven Life.
Yeah.
And she brought together the groups 1 and 2 for a breakfast. And I loved it because it was a beautiful day yesterday morning.
Yeah.
I got out of my comfort zone. Got out of my city. Went into another city and
Right.
found another little spot that has breakfast, and I had some fried green tomatoes. So it was really nice. It was nice fellowship. It's nice just to sit down and talk and just lay everything aside and just spend some nice girl time. And it was just really, really good. So
Yeah.
it has been a good week. It's been a good week. And I'm just looking forward to our author tonight.
Oh, whew. Looking forward to our author tonight. Let me tell you a little bit about our author tonight. Let me tell everybody else what's happening, because when they come in at different times, it's going to flip for them.
Exactly.
This author was scheduled to come on. I can't remember where JD is from, but for this particular interview, we had scheduled it, and I think we had to make some changes. But when he was available, it seemed like one of us wasn't. And this particular time, I was not available. I was out of town, but we didn't want to reschedule because
again.
he's got a really interesting book, an interesting story, and we wanted you all to have an opportunity to meet him. So we scheduled a recording of him, interviewing him and talking about his book. But I wasn't there for the recording.
Right.
So when this flips over and we come back, you'll be looking at Victoria and Ruth and the guest.
Right. And let me say something too before you start his bio.
What happened,
Y'all,
Andrea?
please forgive me. Something, it's always me, right? It's always me. Something happened with the lighting, and I am not as bright as I am now. I don't know what happened to my ring light. Something was going on, but once again, we didn't want to not record the interview, so it's not as bright, but you can hear us. On my part, Ruth and the author is fine. It's me that looks a little dark on the screen, but we got through it, and so I'm grateful. It's a good book. Good book.
Good book. So I wanted to make sure that I told you all that, because when we come back from our little break, you'll be looking around going, well, that looks a little different. That doesn't
Exactly. We have
looks like Ruth.
totally different clothes on.
But let me tell you about JD, Jonathan Dylan Barker. He's described as an international best-selling American author whose work has been broadly described as, get this, suspense thrillers, often incorporating elements of horror, crime, mystery, science fiction, and the supernatural. Right up my alley. Got all those good things. Yes.
Me too.
And his book that he's going to be sharing with us tonight is called, and the title, you know how we talk about the importance of the title in that first sentence? The title, ready? Something I Keep Upstairs. I love it from that point on. So after this short break, we're going to come back and you will see Ms. Ruth Griffin and Victoria Henderson interviewing our guest, JD Barker.
That's right.
And we are back. All right. Well, welcome, JD. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, of course, and I have to say, when your PR person sent me an email and I saw your name, I was like, oh, that's a yes. I had read your book, Dracul. I love your writing, and just the opportunity to speak with you. I could not pass that up. So,
oh man,
yes,
that book was a favorite of mine to write. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but like it, because I got to use all of Bram Stoker's original notes and journals and his sister's diary and all this crazy material when we put that book together. And like I really feel like, after reading that, like the movies that have been made about Dracula, they really didn't like do the story justice.
No.
Like Francis Ford Coppola really romanticized them, and I'm watching Nosferatu right now, which is very creepy. But like they get the story right. Like I think Bram would watch that and he'd be like, "Yeah, that's it."
Yeah, yes, most definitely.
I have to go back and read that one. What did you say? Is Dracul?
Dracul.
Oh,
yes, you will enjoy it. I promise.
Yes.
Promise you that. So, but let's get started today. So, we. Again, welcome, and let's talk about your book, Something I Keep Upstairs. So tell us about your book.
Yeah, so that was another crazy fun one to write. Everybody always asks me where my ideas come from, and there's no like set place for ideas. I live on a little island off the coast of Portsmouth in New England called
Hmm.
Newcastle. My wife and I moved out here right before COVID hit. Got to renovate a house during COVID, which was a lot of fun.
No doubt.
And the island, like I basically finish up my work, my writing and everything for the day at 3 o'clock, and I go for a run every day. I do a lap around the island. It's 4.2 miles, and I use that
Oh,
time to kind of
wow.
think about what
Wow.
I'm going to write the next day, and
Yeah.
kind of stay in shape, because when you sit behind a desk all day, it's not easy to do that.
Mhm.
But
Right.
at one point, I crossed the beach, and when I'm on the beach, I can look out over the water, and there's this little island off our coast, about a quarter mile out. It's only about an acre. It's real tiny. There's only one house on it. It's this little white house with a red roof. And I
Oh,
saw this house like every day on this run for like probably the first year and a half, 2 years we lived out here. And my writer brain is, immediately going, what if, what if, what if, because you can't tell what's going on out there, quarter
right.
mile, it's just far enough away where you can see that it's there. But
Right.
you don't know if somebody lives in it. You don't know if it's abandoned. So I started to research it, and I found out that it used to be a life coast or a lifeguard life-saving station. Like they used to launch boats off of there as rescue ships, like way
Wow.
back in 100 years ago. And it's since been abandoned, and a guy took it over, and he's been raising money to renovate it. He took me out there on his boat, and when I stood in on the island and in the house, like all I wanted to do was leave. And like I don't know if you've ever like
Wow.
had like do you guys believe in paranormal at all?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
anything? Okay.
Yes.
Like I don't know that I necessarily believe in ghosts or paranormal type stuff, but like I'm smart enough to understand there's a lot I don't understand.
Right.
Mhm.
And when I'm standing in a house and like the hair is standing up on the back of my neck and on my arms, and like every instinct in me is like, you need to leave here now. Like I
How
try to
did you
follow
know?
that. Yeah, I liken it to like, like if you're in a room with a cat, and something makes
Yes.
some noise in the corner, that cat is
Yes.
gonna bolt. It's gone. It disappears. It doesn't care what
Right.
made the sound. It just vanishes. People are stupid. Like we have evaluated like over the years, we've kind of talked ourselves out of these basic human instincts to be afraid,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
we hear
I
that same
agree.
noise and we'll go and try to figure out what made it. So
Walk
yeah,
away
so like
from the lights. Walk away.
walk away. Yeah, you got need to know when it's time to leave.
Right.
But I left this house, and and he gave me, he showed me what he was doing to renovate it, and like he was doing a fantastic job. And like the whole time I'm there, I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. Just
Oh,
crazy
wow.
nasty vibes. So I left and I started researching it, and I learned that back in hundreds of years ago, there was a yellow fever outbreak in this area, and they used to quarantine people out on that island.
Oh,
During yellow fever. During the Spanish American War, they used it as a prison. So the American fleet would capture boats, and they would basically make the boats dock at Wood Island, and they wouldn't let anybody leave the boat. They would basically starve them out. So they would leave them on the ship until either disease or lack of food basically killed off the crew, and then they would take the boat because that's what they ultimately wanted. So what I learned, like I found so many different stories about this just
Right.
researching the history of it. Like all these people that died around the island, but I could never find anything about anybody actually dying on the island.
Mhm.
Closest story I found is in 1972. Somebody was out there picnicking on the beach, and they found 2 bodies buried on the beach.
Oh.
Um,
Oh.
and this was another weird one too, because I found one newspaper article about it. There's photographs. You can see the district attorney standing out there. Everybody was kind of pointing fingers because the island itself is it's right on the border of Maine and New Hampshire in the
Right.
water. So when something bad happens, law enforcement tends to point fingers. It's like a hot potato. Like you take it, no, you take it, no, it's your
Yes.
jurisdiction. Like they don't really want it. So ultimately, the FBI stepped in and took over this case of these 2 missing bodies. And that's like, it's all in this newspaper article that I found. So then I reached out after reading that to the local police departments, and I couldn't find a single one that had any information on this. They like
Wow.
no documentation. I reached out to the FBI. They don't have a case file. They don't have anything on it. But I know it happened because there's pictures. Like there's
Mhm.
it's a the newspaper story. So these bodies basically vanished. There's no nobody ID'd them. Nobody knows how they
Wow.
got there, who they were. I found all this crazy stuff. Which just fed my writer gene, that
Right.
what
I
if
was going
gene.
to say, you put that in the book. So,
Yeah. I love taking factual stuff and mixing it with fiction.
Yeah. Okay.
For me
Okay.
as a reader, like when you read this one, you get to the author's note at the end, and I tell you what parts are actually true.
Yeah.
And then you can hop on Google and you can research it for yourself.
Look at
I
that.
found tons of stories from locals about things out there on that island. A lot of stories about a little girl that people see on the beach. She's about 7 or 8 years old, blonde hair, wearing a white dress. And nobody knows who she is, how she got out there. Like they don't know that she's real, but like I heard this from a lot of different places. So this is like a story that's been around this area for a couple hundred years. And, in New England, a couple hundred years isn't a long time. That's like you go, like I grew up in Florida. In Florida, anything over 10 years is like a long time ago. But up here in New
Wait a
England,
minute. Have you
nothing.
seen the little girl?
I haven't.
Oh, okay.
So I looked, like I would love to, there's nothing I would love more than to, turn and see a ghost, standing in a corner, validate that there's actually something there. But it hasn't happened to me yet.
What a story.
I talked to some people who you said they've heard voices inside the house.
Okay.
They think it's the Coast Guard employees that they used to work there that died trying to rescue other people.
Oh wow.
Lots of local lore all around this place. So it was prime real estate to set a scary book.
Oh, yeah. So you alluded to your writer brain, and how is this something that you've always wanted to do? Have you been a writer since forever?
Pretty much. I mean, I grew up without a TV in the house, and this was the 70s, so that doesn't really mean much. We had 3 channels, so there was nothing worth watching anyway.
Come on.
But we used to hit the library all the time, and I had a sister who was 15 months younger than me. So I remember writing stories, and I would staple them, and I created like a little library in my room, and she would check the stories out, and I would charge her late fees. So this dates back, like I was probably 5 or 6 when we were doing this. So it's one of those things. My parents encouraged it. They said, like writing was a fantastic hobby and they wanted me to pursue it as a hobby, but they said, you can't make a living as a writer. You have to go out and get a real job.
Right.
So I followed that path. I went to college, I got a couple of degrees. I ended up working in business and finance for years, but I would come home and I would write at night in order to stay sane and keep my head on straight.
Wow.
Okay. So how long was it before you took off then?
I had a very weird career. So back in the 90s, when I was in college, I worked for BMG Distribution, RCA Records down in the South Florida area. I was basically in charge of, if they had a recording artist come into town, I'd have to pick them up at the airport, get them to the radio stations for their interviews, get them to their concerts, get them to their hotels. If you've ever seen that movie, Get Them to the Greek, that was basically, that was my life. And, I was in college. College is expensive. And I realized I've got some very famous people in the car with me, sometimes for a week at a time. So I started to interview them, and then I took those interviews and I sold them to magazines like 17 and Teen People and Tiger Beat.
Oh, yes. That's magazines.
That's anything I saw my sister reading back in the day. Those were my target audience. And, when you work for newspapers and magazines, you quickly realize everybody you're working with, they've got a novel at some stage of development. It's in a desk drawer somewhere. It's 400,000 words. They've been working on it for 10 years. It's almost done. It just needs a little something. I was very good with grammar and punctuation, and they just started giving me those books to go through, to clean up.
Right.
And I started offering developmental suggestions, and then I started to rewrite them for a fee. And it kind of turned into this side gig, is what I called a book doctor and a ghostwriter. So I helped these people tweak their books and get them to the point where they could be published. So I did that, at night and on weekends for about 23 years. And I ended up with 6 different books that hit the New York Times bestseller list that I had written, but had other people's names on the cover when they came out, which gets very old after a while.
Right.
So that 6-1 hit up. This was 2013, 2014. My wife pulled me aside and she said, "Listen, I know you want to be a full-time author. Let's find a way to make this happen." But at that point, we were kind of stuck because I had a corporate job and I had a big salary. I hated the job, but we had the trappings of that. We had a big house, we had cars, we had a boat. Our monthly nut was around $10,000 to $12,000 just to sustain the lifestyle. So we couldn't just pick up and leave. So she came up with this crazy plan. We sold everything that we owned. We bought a tiny little duplex in Pittsburgh and rented out one side to some tenants, and we moved into the other side and got to the point where we had 0 bills. We lived off the income we were getting from our tenants. Then we sat down at the kitchen table. She showed me the bank statement, our savings account. She said, "Okay, you've got about 18 months to make it as a writer before we run out of money. Go." and nothing like putting your feet to the coals to get it done.
I like the wife. What's her name?
Yeah, I would still be working that job that I hate if she had not forced me to do that. So I am forever grateful for that.
Look at
Oh,
that.
that is incredible. And you know, oftentimes here on Authors Up, we do talk about the author's journey because that itself, you know, feeds into the output, you know, what we
Definitely.
write, what, you know, and oftentimes it's inspiring for others. You know, it's not just let me write a book, let me sell it,
Yeah.
and here I am, my life as an
Yeah.
author.
Yes.
That's just not
Well,
the case. So,
on TV and in the movies, they always make it seem, like
mhm.
this author is, you go to a cabin in the woods somewhere, you pound out your
Oh yeah.
novel on a
Right.
typewriter, the pages stack up next to your typewriter, you mail it off to your agent, and then you don't have to do anything for another year, while that
No,
book comes out. And yeah, it's not like that.
Right.
and
no, not at
and
all.
it's hard to break out. It's hard to get started. It could be scary.
Yeah.
So I talk about it a lot because every author I've ever met, they all started off somewhere, like that. Like Stephen King wrote Carrie sitting between a washer and dryer and a trailer.
Mhm.
Like
Look at that.
James Patterson. I've written a bunch of books with Jim. And he started off in advertising. He was working in New York
Right.
at a marketing company, writing books at night, when that first one hit. So
Wow.
Yeah.
I like
we've
his
all
book
got that
too.
origin story.
Look at
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh, no doubt, no doubt. So tell us, obviously, you know, going back to something I keep upstairs. How
Yeah.
long did it take you to write that? From that time when that idea hit to all of the, you know, research you had to do. What was that journey like?
So for me to write a book, it takes me typically 3 to 4 months. I'm pretty
Okay.
fast to write a novel. This one took me
Wow.
4 years from start to finish. I had to keep putting it aside because I kept
Mhm.
running into stuff that would either freak me out or scare me, or something based in reality that I didn't expect.
Okay.
Like there were things I put on paper that I later learned were true, which makes
Oh.
no sense, but like that kind of stuff kept happening. And to me, it seemed, just like we were talking about at the beginning, almost like bad juju, like a bad, omen,
Mhm.
like this is maybe not something I should work on. But
Right.
I powered through it, and I got the book done. I struggled for a little while with the names, the towns and stuff
Okay.
like that, because, my agent said, well, you can't keep the town name because that's a real town. You live there. Like I based it in Newcastle, where I actually live. Wood
Mhm.
Island is a real place. You can't use that name. Then lawyers and stuff love to jump all over that. Like when you turn a
Right.
book into a publisher, there's a form you have to fill out, and you have to name every place that's real. Then they typically will require you to get permission to use it.
Mhm.
So it's this
Oh,
whole
okay.
thing.
Okay.
So I almost changed the titles and the names and all that kind of stuff, but it just didn't feel right to me to do that, because it, a lot of ways it's historical, so I
Right.
wanted to keep true to that. So there was some pushback there too. And a lot of stuff has changed for me on the publishing side. Back when I started this book, I was still working with the traditional publishers.
Okay.
About a year and a half ago, I signed a deal with Simon and Schuster, where they allowed me to create my own imprint. So I
Oh.
basically have my own publishing company now, but I have distribution through Simon and Schuster.
Okay.
So I don't have to deal with a lot of those headaches that I had before. If I want to put something like this out, I'm the decision maker there, so I can do it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That is. So, has that changed the way you look at creating your own imprint then? You know, if you no longer have the headaches, has that changed your process? Has that changed your, you know, your outlook for publishing, for writing?
It has in a lot of ways. Your audience is writers, right? So I can go into the weeds a little bit.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So like my first book, I indie published it. And
Mhm.
I made a conscious effort, if I was going to do that, I was going to, make it something that's on par with something coming out of Random House. So I hired professional editors, formaters, cover designers. When I put it out, we put it out as a hardcover, an audiobook, and an ebook all the same day. Released the paperback 6 months later. I basically did everything that I see them doing.
Mhm.
And I ended up selling about 250,000 copies of an indie
Wow.
published title, which is a decent amount, and it's enough to throw you on the radar of the traditional publishers. So when my second book was ready, I had no trouble getting an agent. The book ended up going to auction. I got a film and TV deal, and ultimately sold the book for a 7-figure deal. So I kind of had
Wow.
feet in both of those camps for a little while. And then my next couple of books I put out through the traditional publishers. I was with Random House, I was with Putnam, I was with HarperCollins.
Right.
But like once you get a taste of being an indie and that freedom that it gives you,
Yeah.
it's very hard to not think about that, because when you turn in a book to a traditional publisher, like they can change the title on you, they can change anything. That
Wow.
you've got no control.
Right.
And I looked at the economics of it too, because as an indie author, you make about about 70 cents on the dollar. And as a traditional author, they may give you a nice big advance check, but you've got to pay that money back. And you're paying it back in these small little incremental payments of maybe 10 or 15 cents on the dollar. So you've got to sell a lot more books in order to make that same money.
Right.
So like as I went further and further along, it made less and less sense to me. So I wrote a book a few years ago called A Caller's Game, and I sent it into my agent, and I said, listen, I'm going to retain English rights for myself, and I'm going to put it out on my own. You can go ahead and sell all the foreign territories. And at that point, I was in about 150 different countries, about 25 different languages. So she was perfectly happy doing that. So we did the next couple of books that way. I published it in English. She took care of selling the foreign rights. So it was basically a hybrid approach, and I liked that quite a bit. But I still had the same problem that I had in the past. As an indie author, there's places you just can't get into. You can't get your books into Costco. You're not in the grocery stores. It's difficult to get into airports. So I wanted to solve that problem. And I was trying to come up with a solution for that when I wrote a book called Behind a Closed Door. I sent it off to my agent. He started shopping it. We immediately got a film deal on it, which meant all the publishers wanted it. And it was about to go to auction with the publishers. This is about a year and a half ago or so. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine at Random House. And she said, listen, we're about to offer on your book. And when that comes in, you need to turn it down. And I asked her why. And she said, well, we're about to lay off a lot of people. And the editor who wants your book is on that list. I got a similar phone call from a friend of mine at HarperCollins. And then about a week or two later, all these layoffs across the industry happened.
Oh, wow.
And if you've ever had a friend who's got a book with a publisher and you lose your editor, that book can sit there in limbo for a very long time, depending on your contract. It may not come out at all.
Oh, wow.
So that really frightened me. And that's what spurred me to start the conversations with Simon & Schuster. I had worked in finance in my last real job. Simon & Schuster had just gotten bought by a private equity firm. So I reached out to some people I knew and ultimately started those conversations and ended up creating my own imprint there. So that's where I'm at today. So I've been an indie, I've been traditional. Now I'm my own publisher with Simon & Schuster handling print sales and distribution. I honestly think we're going to see a lot of other authors sign deals similar to what I have right now, because it makes a lot of sense if you're a decent selling indie author to go that route.
Right. And actually, I was reading an article last week that spoke about that trend where, you have authors who did traditional, authors who moved into, it's like a pendulum. So it's swinging back, but it's got to find its place somewhere in the middle. It's just, I see them, either the indie or the traditional as extremes. So there's got to be a place in the middle that benefits both the editor and both the author.
Yeah, I mean, the waters are getting muddy, right? Like there's really, a couple of years ago, there was a major distinction between indie and traditional. And now, almost everybody I know is somewhere in between. I get phone calls all the time from friends at the traditional publishers. They get their rights back on, some title they published 10, 15 years ago. And they're like, how do, what do I do with this? Can I put it out as an indie? How do I do that? Like they just don't know. But it's happening more and more. And you go back 10 years ago and what they would typically do is their agent would just take those rights and they would resell them again, usually for less money than they got the first time. So every time they resell them, that number gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's meaningless. But that's changing. A lot of them now, they're getting smart. They're getting the rights back and they're figuring out how to get those books out on their own and capturing that revenue for themselves.
Right. And that's what it's about. So,
yep.
Okay. Victoria, what you got?
Well, I love the book. So I'm going to say it right off the bat. Get the book, y'all. Get the book. Something I keep upstairs. It is interesting. It's tantalizing. How did you come up with all those characters and all those moving parts? I want to be in your brain for a second.
I wish I could explain it. I honestly don't know where like 99% of this stuff comes from. When I'm writing, it's like watching a movie in my head, and I'm just writing down what I see as fast as possible. I had the tagline for this book at the beginning. The tagline for the book is, "For a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die."
Oh, wow.
So I knew, with that line in mind, where the story was going.
Right.
The story is essentially a kid inherits this house, the house on Wood Island. His grandmother owns it.
Right.
She passes away and they're estranged. He doesn't know his grandmother, but she leaves it to him. So he's 17 years old. He's, in high school, and he just inherited a house on an island, off the coast. So he does what every other typical teenager would do. do, he turns it into a party house for him and his friends.
Yes, he does.
Because that's what would happen in real life, right? So they hop in their boats, they head out there. It's the perfect place for that because the parents can't get to them, the police can't get to them. They can finally be left alone to have some fun. But partying gets boring, very, very quickly. So at one point, his friends, somebody raises their hand and says, "Hey, what would it take to turn this house into a haunted house?" And they start off with, the typical stuff that you would expect, there's Ouija boards and things like that, but things escalate. And like I said, the tagline is, for a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die. So you know where they're going.
Okay. Right. So I'm going to say it. This is, get the book, you guys, get the book. We absolutely love it. But, I want to steer it a little bit to you before we hit that record button. We were talking about autism and creativity and how that intersects. And I would love for you guys to have that conversation. Ruth had said her diagnosis and you said your diagnosis. So y'all go ahead and talk about that. I just want to listen.
Yeah, so we were talking a little bit before you hit record. So I was diagnosed at 22. I was born in 1971. Back in the 70s, they didn't look for this kind of thing. You were basically the weird kid off in the corner. They didn't deal with you. No special treatment, no nothing. You just you had to get through life with that. And that's what I did. I didn't realize there was anything, I don't want to say wrong with me, but different about me. Like I didn't understand what it was. I saw other kids interact with each other and I didn't understand why it was so easy for them to socialize, to do these things that I found to be really difficult. But I didn't understand the reasoning behind it. And that was literally my entire life up until I was 22. I was fantastic in school. I've got a great memory. So memorizing facts, learning things like that, it's never been an issue for me. But dealing with other people has always been problematic. So when I got into the corporate world, I was a chief compliance officer for a brokerage firm, which is as horrible as it sounds. It's like being internal affairs at a police department. You're basically responsible for watching every rule and regulation regarding the securities industry, making sure none of the employees do anything they're not supposed to, make sure none of the clients do anything they're not supposed to. So I spent a lot of time in an office all by myself studying data. So as an autistic person, that's perfect. I'm solving a puzzle. I'm looking at information. Where the problems came about is when I actually found something and I had to actually go and talk to another human being about it. And essentially confront somebody because typically they did something wrong. So it's already a negative situation when you walk through that door. My boss recognized the fact that I was very good at the job, but I had problems with the people skill side of it. He thought I had anger management issues because he didn't know what autism was either. So he sent me off to anger management classes, and I was in an initial therapy session with the woman who ran this class, and she stopped us about 15-20 minutes in, and she's like, "Have you ever been tested for autism?" And again, I didn't know what that was. I was like, "No, I don't know." And she goes, "Well, the entire time we've been talking, you haven't made eye contact. I've noticed that you rub your thumb and your forefinger together whenever you think." And she just started pointing out all these little things that I've done my entire life that I never really thought twice about. And then after that, she sent me for some tests, and we landed on a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, which is what they called it back then. Today, you're just on the spectrum somewhere. But in my world, that gave me a name to the problem that I could solve. And the more I researched that, there was a lot of aha moments there. I started to understand a lot of the things that were, happened to me over the course of my lifetime. And, I at one point we made a list of things that I considered to be problems. And then we made another list of things that, I considered to be benefits. My memory is near perfect. I can remember everything from the time I was like 3 years old until today. But from my standpoint, I'm 54 now. So my attic is very cluttered with information. I would like to be able to forget some stuff because I'm running out of room up there. But I noticed that as an autistic person, when I'm in a social situation, I tend to mimic other people. So if somebody cracks a joke, I'll laugh, but it's because everybody else around me is laughing, not necessarily because I thought it was funny. But I always mimicked other people, and I learned as an author, I can mimic voices. So if you put text in front of me written by somebody else, I can pick up on that writer's their vocabulary, their cadence, their voice, and their writing style, and continue writing as them. Which has been a huge benefit as I moved on through my writing journey. So I basically doubled down on the stuff like that, the things that worked well for me, and then I spent a lot of time working to correct the issues that didn't. I'm 30 some years into that process. I don't think it's ever going to end, but it's just one of those things.
And you know what? Honestly, it is amazing to hear you say that. I am like you, a child of the 70s, 50 years old. I am 1 year into my diagnosis, actually about 10 months.
Wow.
And, I have, even especially being online, you look for other folks, you look for communities. And a lot of what I've heard is, there's no positive side to this. And I feel like even with you saying that, it is about making some of these things positive, because at this point I'm still learning what is, I feel, what is me, what is this disorder, where I stopped developing. But it is also understanding that maybe some of this just isn't negative at all.
Right.
So,
No,
and I have been writing since, I was a child. I didn't get published until I was 30 some years old. And for me, it was always, this was my outlet. And now I'm learning, how can those two come together? How can I make one work with the other? And it's not always the doom and gloom, the stimming, the just being unable to focus, being unsociable. But there are portions of it that can
It is positive. It is positive. Look at the work that you both have created. So the creativity is there. And I think that I'm just, observing, but for the two of you, it's been a positive for you, and it has helped your writing journey. Would you say that to be true too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, your brain just works differently than
Right.
what people expect. You're a minority when it comes to that.
Yeah.
But that's all it is. I mean, like when I look back on things, all that reading that I did as a kid, I'm very good at recognizing structure. So all the books that I read, I basically learned how a story is supposed to be structured, and that I've never had any formal training as an author, but that framework is up here. So when I started working as a book doctor, helping other people, I could compare that framework that I learned from reading all those books to what they put in front of me, and I could see where they made missteps. I could see where their pattern was off, where they took a wrong turn. I was able to recognize that. For many autistic people, patterns are very important. Routine is very important.
Right.
I'm very good at organizing things. And I know all of this stems from autism. Like you can kind of see my desk behind me. There's literally nothing on it other than my MacBook.
I just moved. I just moved. Can I borrow you for to come my apartment?
Yeah, I've got 8 different books I'm working on right now, and there's not a scrap of paper there. It's all up in my head. So those are things I know I wouldn't be able to do without autism. The complexity of the stories that I write, it's all because of that.
Right. Thank you so much for your transparency and for talking about this, because I think it's very important that our listeners and our viewers hear this perspective from you. So I'm going to ask you now, as we about to wrap up, we don't want to take your time up, but where can our listeners and our viewers find you? I know we can find your book all over the place. So I got a couple of questions. The first one is, when is Something I Keep Upstairs coming out? And then how can our listeners and viewers get in touch with you or reach out to you or find you if they wanted to have questions or just tell you what they thought about your books?
Sure. The easiest place to find me is jdbarker.com.
Okay.
The books are pretty much everywhere. You can find them in any bookstore.
Right.
And Something I Keep Upstairs releases on May 13th.
All right. Yay.
That is exciting.
Get the
All
book,
right.
y'all. Get the book. I wish we could keep going. Oh my gosh. So the book is just wonderful. I just love it. And I am now a fan of yours, and I'll be following you. Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you.
All right. So we will take a break here, and we will be back in a moment. JD, thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, we are back.
Wow. I really, really love the opportunities that Authors Up provides for those who are brave enough to tune in. Going on. We always say that everybody has a story, and it just depends on how they want to tell it, whether they want to tell it. And who would think that a thriller, a suspense novel, or however you want to categorize it in the genre, with that title would lead to a snippet of a candid conversation
Right.
about autism
Right.
that turned out to be just a positive force in his life. And that's something about ghostwriting.
Yes.
You have to be able to catch the rhythm of the writer. You have got to, it's not like you are giving your perspective, you're giving a perspective through somebody else's eyes.
Right.
You know, and I have done ghostwriting before, and
Mm-hmm.
it was difficult to turn the assignment over to someone else because I had to tell them, no, you speak as that person.
Person.
You
Yeah.
don't-
Yeah.
If they didn't mention cats in the attic, you can't mention cats.
Right.
You have to be aligned with what they think, and I'm really, really grateful that he was willing to share
Yes.
that part of his life, because it was very, very much a part of his writing journey,
Right.
and it just shows the and I don't want this to sound crazy, but we can't write people off.
Right.
We
Amen.
have to be better.
Amen.
We
Amen.
have to be better at understanding
Right.
that there's a reason why we do what we do, and there's a reason why we do it the way that we do
We
it.
do it. Exactly.
I went
Exactly.
back the other day and looked at a book, and I'm not sure it was through Authors Up or another book club, but it was the book written by the boy who had autism, and he was talking about why I jump.
Oh yes, I think we did that through the River Book Club. I think so.
Why I jump, and
I
I just
remember that.
it is amazing to be able to see someone who is that successful and not necessarily put yourself in a place of comparison,
Right.
just putting yourself in a place of gratitude for having the opportunity to entertain someone who's willing to share their life's journey.
Exactly.
And I wish him all the best, which I know if he's gotten sick best, he doesn't need my wishes. But
Did he say he was with Simon and Schuster? Did he say that?
I mean, you know,
He didn't say Simon and Shyster. But did you hear him? Did you hear him say he is working on 8 different books that's in his head?
In his head.
He said, not a piece of paper written down. What the what?
Autism.
What?
And they do, autistic people do operate in patterns. They are better
right.
patterns.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's every time I go back to try to add a paragraph to mine, I got to go back and read 2 chapters before that to get back in the flow. And he's got 8 different books in his head. Well,
I can't even find the ones I'm working on, so I know they're not up here. I'm not sure they are where they are, but I know for sure they are not up here. I
was just amazed. I was just amazed. I was like, I had to stop talking about the book for a minute, because when he said that about autism, it just, I just really thought it was really important to bring that out.
Yeah.
That somebody that listens or watches our show needed to hear that.
Yeah.
That they are definitely not alone, and the creativity between him and Ruth.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's just amazing to me.
Well, I tell you what, even before we came on the air, I was like, I can't find my paper. Where
is that right? I know.
8 books up in his head. I'm thinking, oh my goodness.
Well, I'm gonna say it again. Get the book, because I really enjoyed the book that we were talking about. Something I keep upstairs, something like that. Honey, it was really a good book. And after talking with him, he said the book came out in May, so it has already come out. So, oh, J.D. Barker, I tell you, he it was one of the better interviews that I remember for a long time.
Well, I tell you what, we are grateful, and we're always blessed that we are able to bring
Yeah.
books to you, to our listening and viewing audience, and bring you the story
Yeah.
behind how the book was written. But it's also just a great delight to be able to open the book of the life of these wonderful authors that we bring to you. So
I
I'm
totally agree.
just grateful for that. JD, you are a wonderful person, and we thank you so much for having been with us. You
Yes.
have the closing out where they can find us, and at Authors Up Show and all that good stuff that you
All
do.
right. Well, you can just to be reminded that you can see this broadcasting again right here on ALH Broadcasting this coming Saturday at 7:00 p.m. Also, the podcast will be uploaded, I think, by Wednesday of this week, and you can find us wherever podcasts are found. You can look for us, Authors Up Show. We are also on YouTube, so it's showed live tonight here at ALH Broadcasting and on YouTube. And if you would like to recommend an author, a book, have comments about tonight's show, just have comments in general, send us an email at authorsup@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to get back to you.
Well done, Queen. Well done, well done. And that is it for us for tonight. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the book as much as we did enjoy bringing to you a good conversation with the author,
Yes.
J.D. Barker. So thank you. That is it for us for tonight. Put us on your calendar, put a pin in it, put us in the alarm system or whatever you have, so you can join us next week, because you never ever know what's going to happen when you tune in to Authors Up.
Authors Up. All right. Good night, everybody. Good night, Bronze Girl. Okay, let me hit the button.